result is not only, I should emphasize, not only do we have an economic problem, we actually, one of the things that America prides itself in is our rule of law. Concepts like innocent unless you're proven guilty, part of our sense of identity. But in this mortgage foreclosure, we put all that kind of thing aside. If a bank says that you owe money, even if you don't, you get thrown out of your home. It is the bank's word against your word. And the bank wins almost always. And now there have been at least some journalists who have been looking at some of these cases, and a few cases of people getting their home back when they didn't owe any money. But this is inevitable when you're pushing so many millions out of their homes. It's an inevitable consequence. Our system is not designed to handle 7 million people losing their homes in a few years, because it's not the way the system is supposed to work. And so in the process, we have destroyed some of our fundamental values. The real failure, though, is in the bailout of the banks. The problem here was understandable. The banks had, as I said, made some very bad decisions, bad lending. They needed a rescue. It would have been very difficult not to just allow them to fail, but that was not the question. The question was, should we use, again, the rule of law? Should we have played by the rules of capitalism? The rules of capitalism say that if you own a corporation and the corporation has so much debt that it can't pay what it owes, then the shareholders lose their wealth and the bondholders become the new shareholders. We have regular laws and we have special laws for banks of how to do it. We call it conservatorship. But these are laws, we've done it in continental Illinois in the middle of the 1980s, and they work. Other countries have done it as well. But we decided to go another direction. We decided that we would socialize the losses while we privatize the gains. That kind of capitalism can't work. It provides perverse incentives, to go back to the theme of incentives. But that was the decision that was taken. Well, as they took that decision, they didn't have a vision of where the financial sector had gone wrong and what we needed to do, what the financial sector ought to do. So one of the problems in our financial sector, there are many, and I can't talk about them here, I'll be here all night. But one of the problems is that after the repeal of the Glass-Steagall Act, the banks got too big. A few banks became too big to fail. And when they become too big to fail, they also become too big to manage. They also become, they know that they can undertake risk. It's a one-way bet. If they risk, gamble, and they win, they walk off with the profits. They lose, the taxpayer picks up the tab. And that's what happened. So they were right to gamble. But that's not, again, leading to economic efficiency. But when we rescued the banks, we focused the attention on the very big banks that had gone out of the lending business. They'd gone into the gambling business. So, meanwhile, while we rescued the big banks, in 2009, more than 140 banks went bankrupt. We let them go bankrupt. Last year, 150 banks went bankrupt, even more. There are 800 banks that are on the watch list that are on the verge of bankruptcy. This is the tip of the iceberg. The real problem is if you have so many banks with problems, they can't lend. And these are the banks, the small and medium-sized banks, the regional banks, that are responsible for lending to small and medium-sized enterprises, or businesses that are the source of job creation in any economy. And so that's why today you look around, lending is less than it was. It's still not recovered from where it was before the crisis. When the president went to the American people and he said, we're saving the banks not because we love them, but because we want to make sure that the flow of credit is continued, he didn't tell you, what he didn't say is that they were going to rescue the banks without any conditions that they continue lending. They were going to give the money to the banks, but not say what they could do with it. They put no restrictions. When we lend money, when the IMF, World Bank gives money to other countries, we put all kinds of conditions. But when we lend money, the U.S. Treasury is at the top of the list of demanding these conditions. But when we gave money to our banks, the U.S. Treasury was on top of those who said no conditions. And so what did they do? The banks used that money to pay out bonuses, to pay out dividends, but not to recapitalize the banks. That was why the money was supposed to be given. But it didn't go to recapitalize the banks. So the bottom line out of all this is it should not be surprising that the banking flow of credit has not been restored in our economy, and it should not be a surprise that things are so weak. So let me just conclude where we are today. We are not, obviously, in a robust recovery. There are inklings, there are glimmerings of some things going better, some things getting worse. Profits are, in some areas, are doing well. And some of you read the financial page, things look good. Let me explain why it is that that isn't a good symptom, a good way of thinking about where the economy is going. Profits are high partly because interest rates, the cost of capital for firms is as low as it has ever been. So firms can get capital at a very low interest rate, particularly if you're a big firm. And secondly, because there's such a high unemployment, wages are also low. And part of the world has done the right thing and is recovering. So there are global marketplaces, and American multinationals are making lots of profits in India and China and other places. And so their profits, those numbers, when you see a multinational, it's talking about not profits in the US, it's talking about profits all over the world. So the fact that profits are doing well is not a symptom that the economy is doing well. Bank shares also did well. Well, the Fed was lending money to the banks at zero interest rates, billions of dollars. If you lend me billions of dollars at zero interest rate, I can figure out how to make a lot of money out of that. And I'm not really a business person, but all I would do is just go down and buy some medium-term bonds and make 3-4%. So the fact is that making money when you can borrow at zero and put your money into a medium-term treasury bill, it doesn't require genius. So the thing I want to emphasize is that these data on profits don't reflect what is really going on in the economy. And there are some aspects of recovery. We should be, you always, when the economy goes down, people get rid of their inventories, they deplete inventories, and they have to rebuild. So there are some good news. But let me just make sure that you come away with a sufficiently a pessimistic view. Ed gave a good introduction, because I'm only going to talk about a small part of the pessimism that I see. But let me talk about a little more narrowly. First, housing market, prices are still going down. Commercial real estate, they use the pretend and extend even more, and we may be able to get through that, but if you look at the numbers, in terms of real estate that's underwater, in most markets, not all markets, but most markets, it should be a source of concern. The high oil prices are taking more money out of the economy. Oil prices went down, but now the rest of the world is recovering, the rest of the world outside of Europe and the United States. That means oil prices are going up, and turmoil in the Middle East means that we're going to be spending more money outside. Data for the last few months has shown consumption spending going up, but most of that spending was going for importing oil and not strengthening the American economy. There's turmoil in international markets, weak Europe. We hoped to export our way out of the crisis, but with a weak Europe, it's going to be very difficult. We had hoped to have a low exchange rate. That makes you more competitive. One interpretation of QE2 was that it was a form of competitive devaluation. I describe